It's no lie that the quality of AAA games has deteriorated over the last few years. It's an opinion commonly held online and one that is, as much as I hate to admit it, often the topic of pretentious video essays. The argument is so done to death that even I, someone who has made videos that fit that description, click off when I hear someone talk about it. So if you're still here, I'd like to reassure you that this video will be the opposite. Instead of whining about EA or Ubisoft, I'm going to focus on the other side of the coin. Indie developers, and more specifically, the genre that I believe caters to them the most. Roguelikes. Now, if you don't know what a roguelike is, well, to be honest, no one really does. Similarly to Souls-likes, roguelike games take mechanics from and are inspired by previous works. Souls-like games are inspired by From Software's Soulsborne franchise, with mechanics such as bonfire checkpoints and difficult boss fights being recontextualized into new games. It's often quite obvious when a game is inspired by Dark Souls, as the criteria for being classified as such is rather black and white. For example, Jedi Fallen Order has bonfires and boss fights, and hideous amounts of backtracking, therefore it must be a Souls-like. However, when it comes to roguelikes, the classification isn't so easy. Here's some footage of the original game, Rogue, to show you why. Rogue is a game released over 40 years ago for early home computers. It was a drastic improvement upon previous adventure games, as they were all text-based. For example, the creatively named Adventure, which allowed players to input commands for their character to progress the story. If you got something wrong, the game would either not consider it a valid answer, as all outcomes had to be hard programmed in, or fork the story due to your command.
Quick editor's note, the game I'm referring to here is not the famous Atari game, also called Adventure. It's the 1976 game called Colossal Cave Adventure. It was later renamed to Adventure or Advent, depending on who you ask, hence the confusion. Resume!
It's a stark contrast to Rogue, which used text displays to instead build explorable environments generated procedurally. This of course brought an essence of mechanical skill to video gaming, where if you died due to taking a fight you can't win, or getting unlucky and missing all your attacks, you'd have to restart from the beginning. You know the immediate consequence of your actions, therefore dying is categorically your fault, instead of going in blind like an adventure. You'd then have to do another run of another randomly generated set of levels, giving the game a sort of infinite replayability that text-based adventures hardly scratched the surface of. These two mechanics, procedural generation and permadeath, are two of many tenets that define a roguelike. These tenets were laid out in an often referenced document known as the Berlin Interpretation. It's a really dramatic name for something quite, random, which acts as a classification key for the genre. Originally published by forum user Jeff Late as a result of a conversation he had at the Roguelike Developers Conference in 2008, he defined a list of factors that make a game roguelike or not. Some of them are more contentious than others. For example, he states that roguelikes should have ASCII graphics like the original game. Like, I'm sorry Jeff, but Rogue is 44 years old and looks it. I don't care whether you're 60 and grew up playing these games, but it looks like shit. I understand being a purist about these things, but it's a bit too far, right? He also states, and many people agree actually, that a roguelike has to have turn-based combat. I see why many of the original classics like NetHack, even like modern examples like Slay the Spire as well, contain it, but personally I just don't see it as necessary because it seriously limits combat mechanics, and forcing players to stop and fight discourages it in general. Like, why would you want to fight this enemy if it means you're going to have to lock into a battle for the next 5 minutes? Moreover, turn-based combat contradicts another point made in the document. Every action must be available at all times. If you lock people into a battle system, it removes that freedom. In general, most roguelike games follow a similar structure. You venture through procedurally generated worlds, acquiring upgrades through defeating enemies, and the randomness of these stages depends on the title. For example, in The Binding of Isaac, the stages are simply just pre-made boxes connected together in random patterns, quite similar to the original Rogue actually. Whereas in Risk of Rain 2, the environments are completely pre-made, however there's no way to guarantee which ones you'll encounter in a run. And also the location of interactables like chests and the teleporter to move on to the next stage is random within the environments, which means no run is the same as the last. This is where a lot of the confusion comes from, about like definition of a roguelike. Games that contain a few of these mechanics but not all are called roguelites. For example, Hades, released in 2020 to critical acclaim, features many roguelike elements such as randomized levels and enemies, but also allows players to upgrade their abilities, with upgrades staying with the player after death. These crucial differences, with the lack of permadeath being an example, are what separates the two genres. I felt the need to mention this as while researching for this video, I found so many arguments and disagreements on ancient forums about what is or isn't a roguelike or roguelite. Some people care a lot about roguelike purity to the point where it gets a little bit excessive. If you feel the need to leave an irrationally aggressive comment on this video, go ahead. Interaction helps in the algorithm, and while you're there, drop a like and hit the subscribe button. Cheers. Roguelikes and roguelites are some of the most popular video games ever made. Games like Binding of Isaac, Hades and Spelunky are up there as some of the most influential and best-selling games of all time. The Binding of Isaac and its remake have together moved over 14 million units on Steam alone. A lot of people are buying these games, but yet the genre as a whole has received little to no interest from AAA publishers. Which is weird, because we all know that AAA publishers value money over anything.
First of all, congratulations,
EA. Hello, I like money.
Surely a roguelike game with the production power of Respawn or Rockstar would be hugely profitable, right? Except it wouldn't be, because roguelikes are the only genre of video game that doesn't benefit from more resources. Quite the opposite. Think of it like this: back in the 80s, when the first games in the rogue genre were appearing, the limiting factor for the scope of a game was the processing power and memory of the practically prehistoric computers that they were being developed on. The home computers that the program was designed to run on couldn't hold more than a few dungeon levels in its memory. Therefore, the developers of Rogue used procedural generation as a workaround for this. Moreover, the existence of permadeath simply meant the game didn't have to store anything in local memory, as it could just re-execute the program upon death instead of having to store any progress locally. The main tropes of the roguelike genre were created out of necessity, and the features that now define it were in fact just a workaround for the shitty hardware of the hobbyists who developed it. Fast forward to modern day, and we find ourselves in, weirdly, the exact same situation. However, now the limiting factor is something completely different. Like I mentioned in my video on the weird obsession with graphical realism, every year the gap between indie devs and AAA studios grows wider. That means that the big companies have the money and manpower to create huge games with deep worlds and stories. These monolithic corporations have left the hobbyists in the dust. Roguelikes now exist to allow small indie studios to create fun and original games without needing the budget of Electronic Arts. The procedural generation and permadeath means that the developers of roguelike titles can focus on making the gameplay as fun as possible, without needing to worry about making a massive open world, which is practically the industry standard for any other genre at this point. Well, obviously that sounds great, but the real question is why? Players know that when they buy a roguelike, no matter the twist added, they're guaranteed to have a new experience every time they start a run. The game that they're about to play is decided by an algorithm, and although that may sound like a negative thing, if the game is balanced well and is inherently fun to play mechanically, it can be quite the opposite, as every run will be different. Take a look at Hopoo Games' Risk of Rain 2. It's the game that I've most likely used as B-roll background footage in this video because it is simply so fun to play, and to watch in my opinion. It's one of the few 3D roguelikes out there, and in my opinion is one of the best to do it. The game has a gameplay loop rather similar to Rogue, in that you explore environments, killing enemies for experience, which in turn levels up your character's abilities. They also drop gold to open chests for randomized items. The main difference is that you're constantly racing against the clock as you play. The difficulty of enemies and the amount of them scales, not with the stage that you are on, but with the time spent in game. This introduces a unique gameplay mechanic where farming for more items becomes a trade-off between the potential to set you up for the rest of the run or completely screw you over, as you just spent 5 minutes grinding gold only to get some D-tier item that doesn't benefit you whatsoever. Moreover, the location of interactables in the environment is completely random, so if you can't find the teleporter to the next stage in good time, you're punished harshly. Moreover, the game's item system contains a deceiving amount of depth to it. The game does a lot of maths behind the scenes, which allows you to dynamically chain together items, which in turn proc other items, leading to a chain of absolute carnage. Thanks to these factors, Risk of Rain 2 is the epitome of what the modern indie roguelike should be, altering the classic formula enough to keep the genre fresh, but still using the blessing of procedural generation to keep costs down and keep the addicting replayability that makes the genre so good up. Thank you for watching this niche video about one of my favourite video game genres. When I began making it, I intended it just to be a deep dive into Risk of Rain 2, but as I researched, I realised the incredible history and potential that roguelikes and lites have. I'm now an expert in obscure video game history, and now you are too. Subscribe for more, check out my other videos, and I'll see you in 4 months when I can be bothered to make another one.